This is my friend, Jeanne Cordova. And Jeanne Cordova was an absolute, she passed away a few years ago, but she was first of all, she was the cutest butch you would ever meet. We met at a straight gay women's conference where Jeanne and I were the only, at the time we were gay, then we were lesbians. But the women were straight and they said, how many of you are lesbians? And we put up our hand. And then they said, how do you define yourself? And Jeanne said butch and I said butch. So they threw us out of the meeting thinking we were imitating men. So that's how we met. And it was a fabulous relationship for many decades. Jeanne was absolutely, she was a great actor. First of all, she was beautiful. She was so handsome butch. She was a great activist, very, very intelligent writer. And we knew each other for decades. Okay. This is the epilogue to her book, because the epilogue kind of explains what the book is about. Dateline, Los Angeles, May 2011. The end of the epic strike against LA's first nationally significant gay center took place in 1978 as lesbians edged closer to achieving equal status in the national lesbian and gay movement. Lesbians began as underdogs in our own liberation struggle and battled for more than a decade to convince boomer gay men that women made quality lawyers, activists, journalists, and legislatures. Many would argue that gay men still don't recognize women as equals, but having lived alongside a generation of gays raised in the sexist and racist American culture of the 50s and 60s, I know for a fact that succeeding generations of men have come a long way, baby. Today I am amused by and admiring of the younger generation of men, both gay and straight, who walk arm in arm in friendship and activism with their lesbian sisters. Well, this isn't in the book, but trust me, it was quite a struggle. It wasn't always so. Back to the book. Two cataclysmic events had to occur in order for early lesbians to come back to working with gay men. The first originated in Dade County, Florida in 1977, when a newly burgeoning American religious right movement put country and Western singer, in quotes, Anita Bryant on its national stage as its anti-gay spokesperson. I'm sure you've all heard of Anita Bryant, right? Because she wasn't famous until then, but she was very famous after. I used to do a joke on her. Anita Bryant is to Christianity what Paint by Numbers is to art. She even quit the church she was going to because the choir insisted on singing Go Down Moses. So yes, Anita was not a good sister, woman. Anita Bryant was their anti-gay spokesperson. The conservative backlash grew quickly into a national movement in reaction to the so-called moral decline generated by 60s liberal activists. Bryant sparked America's first anti-gay crusade by convincing Dade County to rescind its recently enacted civil rights laws protecting gays and in employment and housing discrimination. Actually, I just have to correct it there. There actually was a federal law that Eisenhower signed that was not unsigned until Clinton. So we're talking about like almost 50 years, where if you were gay, you could, or lesbian, GLBT, they didn't even know what GLBT then was, right? But if you were that, then you could not work for the federal government. And there was an activist named Frank Kameny, who was a scientist who got fired, who devoted his life to changing that law, which in the end he did. So this really wasn't the first national, but it was the first one that we were all involved with. Okay. As news editor of the Lesbian Tide, this is Jeanne again, I watched with horror as press releases arrived almost monthly from activists in Dade, St. Paul, Minnesota, Eugene, Oregon, and Wichita, Kansas. Bryant was winning. Gay rights were going down everywhere. This is the 70s. By 78, the Queen of Florida orange juice industries had moved west to California, prompting Orange County Senator John Biggs to put an initiative on the state ballot which called for the firing from California public school system of any teacher believed to be homosexual. From Sacramento to San Diego, gay and lesbian leaders panicked. We realized we'd have to raise millions to fight a statewide ballot. Television ads were the only way to reach the heterosexual middle class who would vote for us or against us. But since the strike of 75 at the LA Gay Center, lesbians struck because they wanted their name lesbians on the LA Gay Center. I know, can you imagine now it's just assumed, well now, no, we're back to being one L, right? We're not lesbians anymore, we're LGBT. People say, what do the L stand for? I say love. All right. But since the strike of 75, lesbians in Southern California were boycotting the Gay Male Center. What to do? Quickly, we realized that to stand a chance of defeating the Briggs Initiative, women would have to return to working with the men in order to unite the movement. I called Bob Sirica, the little newbie from 75, who is now executive director of the Gay Community Service Center. Bob jumped at the overture saying, yes, of course, we must meet and bury the strike division. Hastily, Patton and the strikers met with the Gay Community Service Center's board. Within a week, both sides had settled. The Dykes agreed to end the boycott. We boycotted the center forever. That you have to read the book. She is such a good writer, and it tells every dishy story, including her entire love life, okay? All right, the center agreed to issue a public apology admitting illegally firing the workers, which were the lesbians, and to pay everyone for back wages and compensation. Each striker was given a $90 token check. The strikers no longer cared about the amount. We were facing a multi-million-dollar battle. We had no time to quibble. Timing, the linchpin of politics. Better remember that today. The second historic event which brought gay men and women back into realignment came more horrifically than anyone could have imagined. The catastrophe was the AIDS-HIV epidemic, which arrived cloaked in mystery in Los Angeles in 1983. Thousands of lesbians rushed into the streets, into the bedside of our gay brothers. Women, both gay and straight, became a significant partner in creating ACT UP. ACT UP was founded by my friend Larry Kramer, who just passed away last month. And ACT UP and lesbians helped found dozens of other AIDS organizations. By 1988, the leadership ranks of gay male activists were decimated by the gay plague. Gay Community Service Center could not find enough gay men alive from the boomer generation to fill its higher staff positions. But sexist attitudes among gay men had changed and had become more open, and they had become more open and grateful toward women. Finally, this culminated in 1988 when the board of directors of the Gay Community Service Center named lesbian feminist activist Tori Osborne to their top spot as executive director. Now, this is aside from the book. Tori and I were lovers back during the first March on Washington, but that's neither here nor there. I just thought I'd throw it in. All right. After Briggs was defeated, and the Briggs Amendment, so gay people could teach in schools, otherwise, like today, during the pandemic today, the schools would be empty if all the gay teachers quit or were fired. After Briggs was defeated, dozens of women continued to lay a more polite siege to the Gay Community Services Center, lobbying from within, petitioning from without, begging and demonstrating to add the word lesbian to its name. By the mid-1980s, progressive gay organizations such as the National Gay Task Force, now they call themselves the Task Force, so even gay is out, but then the National Gay Task Force incorporated the word lesbian into their titles. The NGLTF decision marked the exact terms of a lesbian's life and politics and the coalition between lesbians and gay men, according to NGLTF's archival records. But Los Angeles could never lay claim to early self-imposed political correctness. On a hot and humid summer midnight in 1982, 3 Los Angeles dykes led by Christy Kissel, a remarkable 19-year-old then and now the head of whatever, but 19 then. And she was on the staff of the Gay Community Service Center Director of Women's Programming, realized the time had come to take matters into their own hands. Kissel, who had also been my lover, meaning Jeanne's lover, not mine, Jeanne's lover, the summer before her heroic reclamation, told me, by 1980, the LA Gay Community Service Center was run on a social service model by muscular mustache men with MBAs. This was before the AIDS movement proper. Although each month the lines at the health clinic grew noticeably longer, the center was swimming with guppies, gay urban professionals, and formal radical dykes were selling ads in the yellow pages, signs of the time. The gay community and the lesbian community shared the center space occasionally, and occasionally they overlapped. There were women's programs and men's programs and well-maintained room reservation schedule that assured peaceful coexistence. The center had long added to the illustrious board of directors lesbian psychotherapists and lesbian lawyers and lesbian assistant producers. I was not alone, says Jeanne Cordova, the night we scrawled "and lesbian" in pink on purple paint with a little thing, you know, saying "and lesbians" underneath to signify the squeezing in between gay and the community. We painted it on a piece of scrap wood and affixed it to a flat piece like a picket fence, with the notion that we would climb to the roof of the building and wedge the sign with professional block letters above the main sign outside the 2-story building at 1213 North Highland Avenue. Anyway, to this one, no one knows who drove the Dyke getaway car. When the greater LA community woke up the next morning and saw "and lesbian" added to the Gay Community Service Center sign, the news spread a California wildfire to the LA basin. By the time the board of directors saw the new sign on their building, they knew they had a tough choice: publicly erase lesbian or change the name of the place to the Gay and Lesbian Community Service Center. They chose the latter. So what does Jeanne say? This is fabulous. Jeanne interviewed Angela Davis. She was involved in all kinds of very exciting things. She's a brilliant writer. But what did that one paragraph teach us? That taught us that we thought lesbians were almost always included, right? We were not always included. We were never included. Even now, you know, lesbians today, of course, we have a pandemic, so we're not going out anywhere. But so we're not included, but neither is anybody else. But even in the LGBT movement, where we used to have lesbian festivals and lesbian producers all over the United States producing lesbian music and comedy and huge festivals and bookstores, everything. And now all of a sudden the lesbian has become invisible. At least they feel, we, you know, I don't feel invisible. But what happened is there was this miraculous time of lesbians where everything just blew up, and lesbians who had been involved in the women's rights movement came out, and, you know, one lesbian got kicked out of the National Organization for Women. Everybody walked out. We formed our own groups, and we were very, very visible for about 30 years, and especially during the AIDS crisis. And now, you know, not so much. It doesn't matter, I think, to the younger generation, which is fine. Every generation moves on its own terms. And so I don't want to sound old. I'm 78, but every generation moves on its own. Every generation has the right to define its own terms. I'll tell you about this book by Jeanne Cordova. Joan Nessel wrote this. A riveting first-hand tale of a dangerous creative time, the lesbian feminist 70s with their messy, sexy, bold, social and personal visions live again. Cordova was thick in the middle of things as a journalist, as an activist, and as a lover. It's all here. The first lesbian conference, the first women's music festivals, the first gay center, the first lesbian newspapers, the first gay library disputes, lesbian and the SLA and the FBI witch hunts, sex before and after endless meetings. Obviously, I did not stay in long enough at the meetings. Like reading a stormy, passionate family diary that also speaks of a national time. So please, if you have a chance, pick up Jeanne Cordova's book, When We Were Outlaws. Great leader, terrific lesbian, handsome butch, and a fantastic writer. So I hope you enjoy her book for Gay Pride. Thank you, and wishing everybody happy Gay Pride.